stop saying sufficient moral value is the same as equal moral value. So this conflation pops up throughout philosophical discussions of all kinds every day, but the one most damaging is certainly within the field of animal rights. You see, this distinction is incredibly easy to understand, and so complexity is not the source of confusion here. Instead, people are motivated to strawman the philosophy of animal rights, and the equivocation of moral sufficiency versus equality is exactly the kind of strong avenue that allows them to do that. So, I'm going to clear up the sophistry pathway. The less places we give people to philosophically hide, the less sophistry there will be in the world, and thus less evil. Now, what are examples of people making this conflation? Verbally, there's a lot of different ways this can be said, but essentially, the person being strawmanned, maybe misunderstood, says something to the effect of, you shouldn't do X, say rape or murder, to an animal if you wouldn't do it to a human. Or they might even frame it in a question format, like, if you wouldn't do X to a human, what trait makes you find it acceptable to do it to an animal? Then, the person doing the straw man, or making an incorrect and obviously terrible assumption, says something to the effect of, animals and humans are not equal, or killing a human is worse than killing an animal. But that point doesn't engage with what at least most people performing the consistency test, known as name the trait, are actually saying. The simplest way to understand this is by distinguishing sufficient moral value and equal moral value. Name the trait is always making a point only about moral sufficiency. Yet, a weaker and unrelated point is typically what people attack with or speak about after the fact. This mischaracterization makes you feel smart. You probably feel like you defeated animal rights because you misrepresented what someone said and then walked away, but all that really happened was that you said something false. Here's what it really means. The sufficient part of sufficient moral value refers to the status of basic rights that are currently not being respected with regards to animals. Think the right to life and autonomy, to make it simple. Now, when someone asks, if you wouldn't do X to a human, what trait makes you find it acceptable to do it to an animal? They are asking you what trait or traits cause the animal to lack sufficient moral value, such that you'd allow killing, rape, etc. They are not saying that the human and the animal have equal moral value. An easy way to conceptualize the difference between the two concepts is with money. $5 is greater than $2.50, but both are sufficient enough to buy a can of Coke. Animals' moral value would obviously be analogous to the $2.50 and humans to the $5. Practically speaking, this is non-abstract. People already practice this idea daily. You might find that a newborn isn't equal in moral value to Einstein, and yet both possess the minimum moral value to deserve the right to life and autonomy. Nobody would ever say, Einstein is more valuable, therefore it's okay to kill the newborn. It doesn't logically follow. One can value another being or set of beings as more valuable than the other, but deem both worthy enough of basic rights. If that concept is so easy to track, why then, outside of people trying to deceive themselves, is there so much confusion? Like, how and or where do good faith interlocutors go wrong? There's two main points that come to mind. Number one is the concept of the trait equalization process, and it's the main idea behind name the trait that makes it morally indestructible. You see, it's the logical fact that animals have a set of traits true of them, humans do as well, and that if one asserts that humans have sufficient moral value while animals don't, there must be a point in the process of equalizing the traits where moral value is lost for the humans. Maybe it's species, intelligence, both, but whatever the case may be, the idea is just that in trying to determine someone's particular moral view on the determination of where moral value is lost between humans and animals, for someone attempting to name a trait, we're going through a procedure, one which has coined a term that has caused a lot of confusion. So the whole point behind the trait equalization process isn't to find why someone doesn't view animals and humans equally. The indexation of the word equalizing is only relevant insofar as the traits between them go, for the sole purpose of finding out what makes one morally insufficient when it comes to basic rights. The second source of confusion is the word consistency. People seem to think that any framing surrounding the word consistency equals, well, equality. That's not the case, however. Especially now that we understand that the point of name the trait is to determine why one set of beings has sufficient moral value, such that it's wrong to kill and eat them, and the other is underneath said threshold, let's realize what the consistency is actually being indexed towards. It's for a situation where someone who claims that there is a trait or traits that morally separates humans and animals, such that it's okay to kill and eat the one and not the other, name said trait. Let's say they name the traits intelligence and species. And the person reflecting their logical consequences said, okay, to be consistent on that, would you find it okay to infinitely holocaust mentally handicapped supermen? Then what they are asking is, if we took the traits they claim morally differentiate the two sets of beings, would they actually, per only the traits given, as that would be the position in question, would they actually still hold to their position consistently? It's not saying that you are automatically inconsistent on your moral view if you eat animals and not humans. After all, You can be logically consistent but absurd. I know some people say, if they aren't viewed equally, then it's not inconsistent. Well, again, this isn't a matter of equality, and it's not asserting inconsistency exists inherently. It's asserting that inconsistency exists either if you do not have a trait or set of traits morally differentiating the two, but treat them differently, or claim that you do, but don't sign off on the trait or traits in question. Because in either case, you're saying there's nothing that separates the two morally such that one suffers a reduction in value to the point of killing and eating them, but yet I treat the beings differently. That's logically incoherent, aka logically inconsistent. So that's it. It may seem simple to many people, but there's a ton of people who conflate this all the time. And what inspires people to hold dumb positions is not inability of critical thinking itself, but an incentive to not critically think. Definitely send this to someone you see making this painfully obvious error, and together, I hope to blow the sophistry pathway into oblivion.